I woke up one morning to the sound of heavy chains clanking against metal. My Jeep parked in my own driveway was being hooked up to a tow truck. I hadn't even finished my first sip of coffee when I stepped outside and realized this wasn't a random mistake. The person directing the whole scene wasn't the driver, but the president of our HOA, Mrs. Karen Douglas, clipboard in hand, smirking like she was about to crown herself queen of the cul-de-sac. That moment was the start of a war I never asked for, but it sure as hell became one I was ready to finish. My name's Michael Johnson. I've lived in Maplewood Estates for a few years, a quiet suburban neighborhood where lawns are trimmed like golf courses, and the HOA thinks of itself as the Supreme Court. I'm a mechanic by trade, not flashy, not loud. I just like working on my Jeep grilling on weekends and minding my own business. But minding your own business doesn't mean much when you live across the street from a Karen with a clipboard. That morning, I leaned against my porch railing mug in hand and asked as calmly as I could, "Is there a reason you're stealing my car at sunrise?" Karen didn't even blink. She declared my Jeep oversized and visually disharmonious like she was reading from the Bible of neighborhood perfection. The tow guys looked embarrassed, one even whispered, "This thing's on private property, ma'am." But Karen shot back, "The HOA supersedes your driveway. Read the bylaws." I had read the bylaws. Twice. My Jeep didn't break a single rule, but she thrived on intimidation, on rattling people into submission. I told her, "Go ahead, hook it up. But you'd better check your insurance first." The driver hesitated. The chain slipped, and then fate intervened. The hook whipped sideways and latched perfectly onto Karen's pride and joy, her shiny black BMW. The truck lurched, dragging it 2 feet across the concrete with a screech that made my coffee almost spill out my nose. Karen shrieked like someone had shot her, pounding the truck with her clipboard. When the chain finally let go, her BMW had a jagged scar across the grille. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You were saying something about visual disharmony." Her face turned crimson. "This isn't over," she spat. And she was right. It wasn't. By noon, the whole neighborhood had heard. I didn't spread the story. I didn't have to. People whispered, laughed, speculated. But Karen wasn't the type to lick her wounds. By evening, she had stapled a violation notice to my door, her version of a scarlet letter. Then the next morning, she came back with reinforcements. A pack of board members circled my driveway with tape measures, snapping photos like it was a crime scene. Karen barked orders, flipping through a clipboard so stuffed with tabs it looked like a legal brief. That's when I realized this wasn't about my Jeep. It was about humiliation. Her BMW had been dragged across the pavement in front of witnesses, and she couldn't let it go. She'd twist and invent rules until she clawed back her pride. I wasn't worried yet. People like her always underestimate patience. She thought I'd scream and fight. Instead, I smiled, took photos, and went inside. That night, I drafted my own letter not to the board, but to every homeowner. Calm, sarcastic, factual. I laid out exactly what had happened, included the bylaw that proved my Jeep was compliant, and slipped copies into every mailbox. The whispers turned louder. Neighbors looked at me differently, not as the guy with the big Jeep, but as someone standing up to the tyrant. Karen must have felt the tide shift because at the next HOA meeting she staged a full-blown ambush. She had a slideshow of my Jeep from every angle, even shots clearly taken from her upstairs window with a zoom lens. She labeled the tires intimidating, the winch aggressive, the suspension unsafe. I opened my binder, flipped to the same page she quoted, and read aloud. "This subsection is about decorative flamingos and neon paint jobs, not Jeeps." The room chuckled. Karen's jaw clenched. But then she proposed an amendment to ban vehicles over a certain height unless parked in garages. If it passed, I'd be in violation. My stomach dropped. For the first time, I doubted myself. Lying awake that night staring at the ceiling, I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I should sell the Jeep, avoid the fight, just disappear from the crosshairs. I imagined what it would be like to never get another notice, never be singled out again. The thought was tempting. But then I pictured her face that morning, her BMW screeching her rage, twisting into denial, and I knew. This wasn't about harmony, it was about control, and if I gave in, she'd only find another target. That was the night I decided to fight back not with rage, but with rope. Because rope waits. Rope tightens and rope only snaps when someone pulls too hard. Karen was already yanking. All I had to do was let her. The next weekend, she tried again with another tow truck. I positioned my Jeep right next to her BMW security cameras rolling. When the driver saw the setup, he muttered, "I'm not doing this again," and drove off. Karen screamed in the street, her clipboard waving like a sword. That was strike 2. Soon after, she mailed out glossy HOA newsletters smearing me photos of my Jeep blown up like tabloid covers, wild claims about property values dropping 10% because of me. I nearly choked on my cereal. Julia, my neighbor, laughed out loud when she saw hers. "She's lost it," Julia said. I grinned. She just handed me free evidence. I wrote my own plain one-page rebuttal quoting real estate data and bylaws ending with, "If my Jeep really controls the economy, the Federal Reserve should hire it." Slipped that under every door. By the next morning, neighbors were debating in their driveways, comparing her glossy fiction to my simple facts. Some actually clapped when I jogged past. But Karen doubled down. She stormed the cul-de-sac with a manila envelope shouting that I'd be fined $500 a week until I complied. Neighbors gasped. I raised my voice. "Interesting. Section 8 requires a hearing before fines. Did that happen while I was asleep?" Leonard, a board member, spoke up reluctantly. "No hearing has been scheduled." The tide turned. Whispers spread. Her grip slipped. But she wasn't finished. She called the county sheriff. When the deputy showed up, Karen shoved a folder into his hands demanding my Jeep be removed for visual harmony violations. The deputy skimmed it, looked up, and said flatly, "Ma'am, county code doesn't regulate what kind of car you park in your driveway." The neighbors laughed. Karen accused him of being bribed. That's when the deputy warned her about false reports. She blanched and for the first time looked scared. But scared doesn't mean defeated. Days later, I woke to find my Jeep plastered in fake violation stickers clearly printed on her home computer. I peeled them off, documented everything. Then came the lawsuits. 10 grand in damages, she claimed. For what? I laughed. For existing in her line of sight, I didn't flinch. Discovery would unearth every video, every newsletter, every tantrum she'd staged. And then came the climax. One Saturday morning, a massive industrial tow truck rumbled into the cul-de-sac chains, rattling like an executioner's tools. Karen strutted behind it, barking, "Remove it!" Neighbors rushed out, phones raised. The driver hesitated. "Lady, this thing looks fine." "Do it!" she shrieked. The chain dropped, swung wide, and latched onto her BMW. Again. The crowd gasped as the tow truck dragged her beloved car 6 feet bumper, dangling like a broken jaw. Karen fell to her knees screaming, clutching at the twisted metal. Phones recorded every second. Someone shouted, "Poetic justice." I stepped forward, camera in hand, and said calmly, "Funny how that hook keeps finding your BMW instead of my Jeep. Maybe the universe is trying to tell you something." Laughter erupted. Even her loyalists slipped away. The operator fled. Karen screamed threats at everyone, spinning in circles, ranting about conspiracies, until finally she stormed back into her house, slamming the door. By that evening, the footage had gone viral. The HOA board distanced themselves. The sheriff's office opened an investigation. And the neighbors. They'd had enough. At the recall meeting, ballots were cast, and by a vote of 37-6, Karen Douglas was removed as president. She didn't argue. She just gathered her binder, pale and trembling, and walked out alone. And that's where the story ends. My Jeep still sits in my driveway, and the neighborhood finally breathes without a tyrant pacing with her clipboard. But if there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's simple. When someone builds their power on intimidation, all it takes is patience and truth to let them destroy themselves.